They tried to steal my family's sacred 80-year-old cabin over a pathetic $47 fine. I'm Cole Brennan, a quiet Navy veteran. Last month, HOA President Vivian Moorcock arrived in her $80,000 BMW, heels crunching on my gravel driveway as she handed me an eviction notice. Her expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of corruption. She claimed my grandfather's World War II-era cabin was contaminating the lake and demanded I leave in 30 days. This power-hungry ex-lawyer thought she could bully one silent veteran. Big mistake. I own the entire 12-acre Clearwater Lake, every drop, every fish, and their only boat ramp. For 3 years, she's collected $850 yearly fees from 31 families for access that legally belongs to me. That's $78,000 in theft. Now, it's time to collect, with interest. How far would you go to protect your legacy? Drop your ideas below, and tell me where you're watching from, especially if you've faced an HOA tyrant. Here's what Vivian didn't know about the man she tried to destroy. That cabin isn't just property, it's everything I have left. When my ex-wife Sarah ripped me apart in divorce court, she got the house, the cars, hell, even my good socket wrench set. The only thing I managed to keep was grandfather Ezra's cabin, built in 1943 when he came home from the Pacific Theater. This place saved my life. After 20 years Navy service and a divorce that left me questioning everything, these weathered pine walls became my sanctuary. The creak of original floorboards under my work boots reminded me I still belonged somewhere. That stone fireplace Ezra built with his own hands, my therapy session every night. But I'm broke. Freelance marine surveying barely covers beans and gas. Property taxes? $8,400 due in 90 days. Money I don't have. That's when Vivian Moorcock smelled blood. She moved into Pine Ridge 3 years ago with husband Marcus, who owns a regional insurance empire. Got herself elected HOA president, promising property value enhancement. Real translation, making life hell for anyone not driving a BMW. Here's what nobody knew, including me, until I started digging through Ezra's papers. That 1943 deed didn't just include lakefront. It included water rights to every drop in that 12-acre lake. But there's a legal landmine called adverse possession. If you don't actively claim property rights, you lose them forever. Takeaway. Property rights require action, not just paperwork sitting in a dusty box. For decades, I'd let neighbors enjoy the lake for free. Seemed right. Turns out, Vivian built her empire on my generosity, collecting $850 yearly from every household for lake amenities they never legally had access to. The oil leak violation? Pure theater. My truck maintenance is Navy perfect. We don't do sloppy. But at 3 a.m., someone dumped fresh motor oil under my engine. The smell of petroleum on clean gravel still makes me furious. Then the real war started. My clients, boatyards who'd trusted me for years, got anonymous calls claiming I was under federal investigation. 3 contracts canceled overnight. 12 grand gone. Late night breathing on my phone. Boat anchor line cut during a storm. Nearly lost her on the rocks. Tire slashes. Classic intimidation playbook. But Vivian made one fatal error. She underestimated a guy who spent 20 years reading technical manuals. When her environmental expert turned out to have a marketing degree from community college, I knew this was pure fraud. The betrayal that cut deepest? Catherine Valdez, sweet 78-year-old neighbor who'd brought me casseroles after my divorce. She was Vivian's spy, selling my financial struggles for a $2,000 bribe. Trust, shattered like thin ice. That's when the pieces clicked. This wasn't about environmental protection or HOA rules. Vivian was working with Pinnacle Resorts, planning to flip my property for luxury development. Her cut? $400,000 in finder's fees. The math was brutal. Resort deadline, 45 days. My tax deadline, 90 days. Vivian's desperation level, off the charts. Marcus's insurance company was already circling the drain. They needed this resort deal to survive, which meant they'd do anything, and I mean anything, to get my land. Sitting on Ezra's dock that night, cool autumn mist rising off water I legally owned, Admiral, my bloodhound, growled low. Headlights approached through the pine trees. Vivian's BMW, prowling past midnight like a predator circling wounded prey. The taste of determination was metallic in my mouth. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore. Every neighbor had trusted the wrong person with their life savings. Every family paying illegal fees deserved the truth. Admiral's ears perked up as gravel crunched under expensive tires. Vivian was making another surveillance pass, probably planning her next move. She had no idea she'd just picked a fight with someone who actually reads property deeds, and more importantly, someone with absolutely nothing left to lose, except everything that mattered. Time to show this power-hungry HOA president what happens when you corner a Navy veteran in his own backyard. The war was about to begin. Vivian's first strike came disguised as environmental concern. She hired what she called an expert consultant to assess my cabin's contamination threat. This joker shows up in a $1,000 suit, clipboard ready to condemn everything Ezra built with his bare hands. The stench of his cheap cologne couldn't mask the smell of bullshit. His verdict? My 40-year-old septic was supposedly poisoning the entire lake ecosystem. 15 grand in emergency repairs or immediate evacuation. 30-day deadline, perfectly timed with my tax crisis. Small problem. I'd had that system professionally inspected 6 months ago. Spotless. So I did what suspicious veterans do. Homework. Turns out Dr. Expert earned his environmental credentials at community college marketing classes. His septic experience probably peaked at flushing his own toilet. I remembered something my old Navy chief used to say. When someone waves fancy credentials at you, make them prove every damn letter. Jake Riverside, my attorney buddy, nearly choked on his coffee reading the assessment. Cole, they screwed up bad. HOA bylaws require 60-day notice for environmental reviews, not 30. This whole thing's invalid. But Jake's digging revealed something juicier. While demanding I follow every environmental rule, Vivian had fast-tracked her own pool installation without permits. She dumped concrete washout straight into the lake drainage system. The hypocrisy tasted bitter as black coffee. Admiral's warning bark cut through my research. Through the window, Vivian's BMW prowled past again, headlights sweeping my cabin like prison searchlights. Third pass tonight. Either she was getting bolder or planning something nasty. That's when I found Ezra's old survey maps buried in his desk drawer. The original property boundaries told an incredible story. Current HOA parking lot, built 40 feet onto my land. Every morning, 31 families parked on property they didn't own, paying fees for privileges that belonged to me. Vivian had no idea she'd been trespassing for 3 years. Her retaliation came fast and vicious. Marcus's law firm, the same sharks handling his insurance cases, fired off a cease and desist, claimed I was harassing residents by questioning their experts' credentials. Then she escalated to character assassination, called the county claiming I was an unstable veteran with anger management issues. The PTSD stereotype made my jaw clench, but I stayed ice cold. Every phone call documented, every threat recorded. But the real escalation was physical. Someone slashed my truck tires in the middle of the night, cut my boat's anchor line during a storm, nearly lost her on the rocks. The message was clear: back down or face consequences. The betrayal that really stung came from someone I'd trusted completely. Catherine Valdez had been my lifeline after the divorce, brought casseroles when I forgot to eat, listened when I needed to talk. Sweet 78-year-old widow who'd lost her husband the previous year. We'd bonded over shared grief, shared loneliness, or so I thought. Walking Admiral one October evening, their voices drifted through Catherine's kitchen window, her and Vivian, discussing my situation like I was some pest to be exterminated. "You're certain about the tax amount?" Vivian's voice, sharp as broken glass. $8,400, Catherine replied without hesitation. "Poor boy's desperate, won't last another month." And the timeline? 90 days. He showed me the actual notice. The cold night air suddenly felt colder. This woman had comforted me through my darkest period, and now she was selling my secrets. I'd later learn Vivian promised her $2,000 once my problem was resolved. But rage makes you sloppy, and I needed surgical precision. Instead of confronting Catherine, I started feeding her lies, told her I was considering bankruptcy, that I'd given up fighting the HOA. Let Vivian think victory was inevitable while I quietly assembled my real weapons. I installed security cameras around the property, hidden ones that could catch nighttime sabotage. Started documenting every HOA violation I could find. Illegal signage, unpermitted structures, financial irregularities in their monthly reports. Jake's investigation uncovered the kill shot. Marcus's insurance company underwrote HOA's liability policy, but the fine print excluded water-related incidents, unless the HOA actually owned water rights. They'd been collecting premiums for coverage that was legally worthless. If someone drowned in their lake, every board member faced personal bankruptcy. The smell of autumn leaves mixed with diesel exhaust as another car passed. Not Vivian this time, just a neighbor heading home from work. Normal life continuing while I sat on information that could destroy everything they thought they knew about their community. That's when the full scope hit me. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore. Every neighbor deserved to know they were funding a massive fraud. Every family whose property values depended on lake access needed the truth. Admiral stretched by the dying fire, occasionally lifting his grizzled head when engines passed outside. No more midnight surveillance runs. Either Vivian was getting overconfident or she was planning something much bigger. October rain drummed against windows Ezra had installed 80 years ago. Somewhere in the darkness, Vivian was probably strategizing her next move, certain she held all the cards. She had no idea the deck was already stacked against her. Vivian's desperation turned deadly fast. The physical sabotage escalated beyond petty vandalism. Someone cut my truck's brake lines, discovered it when I nearly rear-ended a school bus. The metallic screech of grinding rotors and smell of burning brake fluid still haunts me. Then my gas meter got, mysteriously, damaged during routine HOA maintenance. Sweet, deadly propane filled my morning air. Could have blown the cabin to matchsticks if Admiral hadn't started howling like his tail was on fire. But the real wake-up call came at sunrise Tuesday morning. I was checking fish traps on my dock when a rifle shot cracked the dawn silence. Bullets splintered the post inches from my head, sending wood chips into the lake like confetti. Sheriff claimed hunting accident, despite no hunting season for miles. Someone wanted me dead. Time to find out who else Vivian had crossed. Jake's background research on Vivian revealed a disturbing pattern. Before Pine Ridge, she'd lived in Sunset Lakes, Georgia. Before that, Willowbrook, Tennessee. Same story every time. Move in, get elected HOA president, manufacture property crises, force out owners, profit from land deals. But here's the kicker. I started calling those previous communities. In Georgia, Tom Matthews lost his family farm to a contaminated well that tested clean after Vivian left town. In Tennessee, the Hendersons got evicted for structural violations that mysteriously disappeared when new owners took over. 3 states, 12 families, same playbook. When fraud crosses state lines repeatedly, it becomes federal jurisdiction. That's when Jake connected me with his law school roommate, now working at the Justice Department. Rebecca Ellis specialized in real estate fraud cases, and when I described Vivian's pattern, her voice got very serious very fast. "Mr. Brennan, this sounds like organized criminal activity. Have you documented everything?" The insurance angle cracked the case wide open. Marcus's company hadn't just underwritten Pine Ridge's bogus policy. They'd insured all of Vivian's previous communities. Same invalid coverage, same knowing fraud, same multi-state pattern. Rebecca explained that insurance fraud across state lines triggers federal RICO statutes, the same laws used against organized crime families. But Vivian's next move caught me completely off guard. She contacted my ex-wife, Sarah. Found out through Jake's investigator, who'd been monitoring Vivian's communications. The plan was elegant and vicious. Sarah would file amended divorce papers claiming the cabin was overlooked marital property, forcing a sale. Then Vivian's shell company would buy it at courthouse auction for fraction of value. My ex-wife, who'd already taken everything in our divorce, was now helping steal my grandfather's legacy. The betrayal tasted like copper pennies and broken promises. This mini twist changed everything. Vivian wasn't just targeting me anymore. She was weaponizing my past against my future. Every painful memory from my divorce, every sleepless night wondering how I'd rebuild my life, now served her criminal enterprise. But two could play the investigation game. I started documenting everything with federal-level precision. Hidden cameras caught late-night visitors to my property. Digital recorders captured threatening phone calls. Every slashed tire, every act of vandalism, every coincidental maintenance problem got photographed and time-stamped. Rebecca's initial review found enough evidence for federal charges against both Vivian and Marcus. Mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, insurance fraud, each charge carrying 5 to 20 years federal prison. The community was starting to fracture under pressure. 3 neighbors approached me secretly, admitting Vivian had threatened them into signing false statements. Mrs. Rodriguez whispered that Vivian promised reduced HOA fees for cooperation and doubled fees for disloyalty. Classic extortion tactics. But the federal timeline was slow, and Vivian's timeline was accelerating. Pinnacle Resorts had given her 45 days to deliver my property or face breach of contract lawsuits. With Marcus's insurance business under state investigation, they needed resort money fast. Desperation makes people dangerous, and Vivian was beyond desperate. The scent of wood smoke from my fireplace mixed with autumn leaves as I planned my next moves. Admiral had developed new habits. Instead of barking at every car, he now growled low when specific vehicles passed. Smart Dog learned to recognize threats. Rebecca scheduled our next meeting for the following week. She'd have details about federal grand jury proceedings and witness protection options if threats continued escalating. Sitting on Ezra's dock that evening, watching mist rise off water I legally owned, the irony wasn't lost on me. Vivian thought she was destroying one isolated veteran. Instead, she'd triggered a federal investigation that could expose organized crime connections worth hundreds of millions. Her greed had become her weakness. Instead of taking profits and disappearing, she'd expanded operations until federal attention was inevitable. The taste of victory was still distant, but getting stronger. Like coffee brewing on a cold morning, you can smell it before you can taste it. Vivian had no idea she was already cooked. Vivian's desperation reached a breaking point when she scheduled my cabin's accidental destruction. She forged a county inspector's signature on a condemnation order, timing demolition for the exact day I had my monthly VA appointment 2 hours away. The paperwork looked official until you noticed the inspector's name was misspelled and the date stamp was crooked. Amateur hour, but dangerous amateur hour. The demolition crew wasn't your typical construction company either. These were Marcus's insurance adjusters, guys who specialized in making problems disappear. Their leader, Tony Braswell, had done 3 years for arson in an insurance fraud case. Vivian wasn't playing games anymore. She was planning to destroy evidence and blame me for the accident. But 20 years Navy service teaches you something valuable. When enemies get desperate, they make mistakes. And Vivian was about to make her biggest one yet. Jake's investigation uncovered her true endgame through Pinnacle Resorts' financial records. The plan was elegant in its greed. Force me out through manufactured crisis, buy my land for $50,000 through a shell corporation, then immediately flip it to the resort for $2.8 million, nearly $3 million in profit from stealing one veteran's inheritance. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with autumn air as I studied the financial documents. Every number told the same story. Vivian had leveraged everything on this one deal. Her house, Marcus's business, their entire future depended on getting my property. That's when she made her fatal error. She tried to buy me off directly. Showed up Tuesday evening with an envelope thick enough to choke Admiral. Inside, $25,000 in cash, still crisp from the bank counting machines. "Take it and disappear for 3 months," she said, hands trembling slightly. "When you come back, this whole mess will be resolved." I let her talk while my smartphone recorded every word from my jacket pocket. She'd mortgaged her house to get the bribe money. When I refused, her desperation turned to threats. "You think you're fighting me? This is bigger than me, Cole. Pinnacle has lawyers who eat veterans like you for breakfast. They'll destroy you in court, take everything, leave you homeless." That recording became evidence of attempted bribery and criminal conspiracy. But Vivian revealed something more important than threats, her timeline. The resort deal had a 45-day closure deadline. Miss it, and she'd owe Pinnacle $400,000 in development costs, plus another $150,000 in consulting fees to their legal team. $500,000 reasons why Vivian couldn't afford to lose. The mini twist came when Rebecca revealed the nuclear weapon I'd been sitting on unknowingly. Ezra's 1943 deed included something called right-of-way revocation clause. Depression-era legal language protecting property owners from future development schemes. I could legally cut off all access to the lake, not just HOA access, but access for every property in the entire development. If you exercise that clause, Rebecca explained, spreading legal documents across my kitchen table, every house in Pine Ridge becomes landlocked from the lake. Property values would crash 60 to 70% overnight. The mathematical beauty was staggering. Vivian had spent 3 years collecting fees from families whose properties would become worthless the moment I asserted my legal rights. But using the nuclear option meant destroying innocent neighbors who'd bought homes in good faith. Families like the Rodriguezes, who'd saved 15 years for their dream house. Retirees whose life savings were tied up in property values. The moral weight of that decision settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Admiral's behavior had changed dramatically. Instead of his usual friendly tail wagging at neighbors, he'd started positioning himself between me and visitors. Smart Dog sensed the danger escalating, even if he couldn't understand the legal complexities. The scent of pine needles and lake water carried on cool October air as I sat on Ezra's dock, weighing options. My grandfather built this place to create community, not destroy it. But sometimes you have to break things before you can fix them. That's when I made my decision. Rebecca's office prepared the right-of-way revocation paperwork, complete with federal court filing stamps and legal seals. Every property owner in Pine Ridge would receive certified copies, explaining their lake access was fraudulent and subject to immediate termination. The psychological impact would be nuclear. 31 families would discover their properties were built on legal quicksand. Property values would crater before Vivian could close her resort deal. But I wasn't ready to pull that trigger yet. The nuclear option would be my last resort if Vivian's violence continued escalating. As midnight approached and Admiral settled beside the fireplace, the sound of gravel crunching announced another surveillance pass. Vivian's BMW headlights swept across my windows like searchlights, probably coordinating with her demolition crew. She had no idea I'd recorded her bribery attempt, documented her forgery, and prepared legal weapons that could vaporize everything she'd built. The taste of victory was still distant, but getting stronger. Like the smell of smoke before you see flames, you know fire is coming. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The document that changed everything was hiding in plain sight. While organizing Ezra's papers for Rebecca's case, I found a cracked leather portfolio stuffed behind his old tackle box. The leather smelled like machine oil and decades of basement storage. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth like a military treasure map, lay the original 1943 Clearwater County land grant. My coffee went cold as I read the faded legal description. Ezra hadn't just bought lakefront property. He'd purchased the entirety of Clearwater Lake, including bed, banks, water column, mineral rights, and perpetual access control. Every bass jumping at dawn, every ripple from evening breezes, every drop that reflected morning sunlight, all mine. The financial revelation hit like lightning. Water rights appraisal alone, $2.8 million. Combined with land value, I was sitting on $4.2 million in assets while scrounging for property tax money. The irony tasted bitter as burnt coffee. But here's the real earthquake. Every property sale in Pine Ridge violated state disclosure laws. 31 families bought lakefront homes. With promised access nobody had legal right to sell. Vivian hadn't just stolen fees. She'd been selling fraudulent property rights for 3 years. Rebecca's hands shook when I spread the documents across her conference table. Cole, this isn't HOA corruption anymore. This is systematic real estate fraud. Every mortgage, every title insurance policy, every property tax assessment, all based on access rights that never existed. The insurance catastrophe was equally devastating. Marcus's company underwrote lakefront community policies without verifying water rights. One drowning, one boat accident, one dock collapse, and every policyholder faced personal bankruptcy for damages on property they couldn't legally access. Decades of worthless coverage across multiple communities. But the nuclear option brought sleepless nights and moral vertigo. Asserting my rights meant destroying neighbors who'd trusted the wrong people. Mrs. Rodriguez's retirement nest egg. Young families stretched thin for their dream homes. Even Catherine, whose betrayal cut deep but whose life savings hung in the balance. The scent of pine smoke from Ezra's fieldstone chimney carried the weight of impossible choices. My grandfather built this sanctuary to heal from war, not create new casualties. Rebecca explained the legal tightrope. Federal law requires asserting water rights within 120 days of discovery, or you risk losing them to adverse possession. But we can structure this to protect innocent parties. That's when I discovered Ezra's real treasure. Hidden in the portfolio's back pocket, a dozen handwritten letters revealed his deepest hopes. "This lake should unite neighbors during troubled times," he wrote in July 1943. "Clean water and decent folks make strong communities." Another letter, Christmas 1945. "The lake heals whatever needs healing. Pray someday it helps other veterans find peace like it gave me." His final note, dated 1962. "To whoever inherits this place, remember that kindness builds better neighbors than money ever will." Grandfather's wisdom from beyond: protect community, not just property. The strategy crystallized like morning frost on lake ice. I'd reveal ownership publicly, but offer legitimate lease agreements protecting everyone. Fair access fees, $200 annually, instead of Vivian's $850 extortion. Excess funds would establish lake conservation trust and veteran support programs. Justice without destruction. Community healing, not community breaking. Admiral's tail thumped against worn pine floorboards as I made the decision. 40 pounds of bloodhound wisdom, recognizing when tension transforms into purpose. But first, surviving Vivian's final moves. Rebecca's warning echoed in the autumn air. Cornered criminals become most dangerous when all escape routes disappear. The taste of reckoning was sharp as November wind off the lake. In 48 hours, everything would be public. Every lie exposed. Every theft documented. Every neighbor would learn their community was built on fraud. Time to honor Ezra's vision while protecting his legacy. The countdown had begun. My cabin transformed into the world's most unlikely war room. Rebecca arrived Monday with boxes of legal documents that made Admiral sneeze from the dust. Jake brought his laptop and enough coffee to fuel a small army. Mrs. Rodriguez snuck over with homemade tamales and neighborhood intelligence that would make the CIA jealous. The battle plan had 3 phases, each riskier than the last. Phase 1, legal documentation. Rebecca would file quiet title action, establishing my lake ownership on public record. Every Pine Ridge property owner would get certified letters explaining their access was fraudulent. The shock would crater Vivian's resort timeline while protecting innocent neighbors. Phase 2, democratic revolution. Mrs. Rodriguez was organizing a secret HOA meeting to remove Vivian from presidency. 26 families are ready to vote her out, she whispered, glancing around like Vivian might be hiding in my kitchen cabinets. But they need proof she's been stealing before they'll act. Phase 3, community protection. Simultaneously reveal my ownership and offer legitimate lease agreements. Instead of destroying the neighborhood, we'd save it from Vivian's fraud. Rebecca explained water rights law, while Admiral chewed a rawhide bone that sounded like Vivian's legal position being dismantled. Your grandfather's deed includes adverse possession prevention language. Depression-era property owners learned to protect themselves from squatters and scammers. That legal foresight from 1943 was about to save my inheritance in 2023. Jake's research revealed Vivian's vulnerability timeline. The resort deal required property transfer within 30 days, or Pinnacle would demand $400,000 in breach penalties. Her house was mortgaged to fund the bribery attempts. Marcus's insurance business faced state investigation that could destroy their only income source. They were financially desperate, with nowhere to run. But community organizing proved trickier than legal strategy. 3 years of Vivian's intimidation had neighbors scared to oppose her openly. Mrs. Rodriguez described the fear during our planning sessions. She threatened Maria Santos with code violations for her garden gnomes, told the Hendersons their roof color violated aesthetic standards. Classic authoritarian control through petty harassment. The solution came from an unexpected source, Catherine Valdez. My elderly neighbor's guilt over betraying me had been eating at her like rust on steel. She appeared at my door Tuesday evening, tears streaming down weathered cheeks, carrying a shoebox full of evidence. I kept copies of everything, she confessed, hands shaking as she opened the box. Forged documents, fake witness statements, financial records she made me sign. I was so scared of losing my house, but what I did was wrong. Catherine's evidence box was a prosecutor's dream. Documented forgeries, fraudulent environmental reports, records of bribes paid to fake witnesses. 3 years of criminal activity meticulously preserved by a guilty accomplice. The smell of Catherine's lavender perfume mixed with the weight of redemption as she handed over documents that would destroy Vivian's legal position completely. Rebecca nearly choked on her coffee, reading through Catherine's files. This isn't just HOA fraud anymore. It's organized criminal conspiracy with federal implications. But the real breakthrough came from Jake's financial analysis. Vivian had been skimming HOA maintenance funds for years, using the money to finance her property acquisition schemes, the lake dock repairs that never happened, the environmental studies that were pure fiction, the legal consultations that were actually bribes. $23,000 in stolen community funds, documented with bank records Catherine had photocopied. The taste of justice was getting stronger than Admiral's morning breath. Every piece of evidence made Vivian's position more hopeless, while strengthening our legal foundation. Mrs. Rodriguez's underground network provided the final intelligence. Vivian scheduled another emergency HOA meeting for Thursday night, she reported. Claims there's been a breakthrough in resolving the Cole Brennan situation. Perfect timing. We'd let Vivian announce her victory, then reveal her crimes to the entire community. Wednesday brought the coordination of moving parts. Rebecca filed preliminary paperwork with federal court. Jake prepared HOA meeting materials exposing financial fraud. Catherine agreed to testify about document forgery, despite personal risk. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Vivian's attempts to isolate me had created the strongest neighborhood coalition Pine Ridge had ever seen. Admiral's behavior reflected the changing mood. Instead of defensive growling at every visitor, he'd started greeting allies with tail wags and demanding belly rubs from federal agents. Smart Dog knew the good guys were winning. As evening settled over the lake like a comfortable blanket, the scent of victory mixed with November's dying leaves. Tomorrow would bring public confrontation, legal revelation, and community reckoning. But tonight, sitting in Ezra's chair watching firelight dance on water I legally owned, everything felt exactly right. The countdown to justice had begun, and for the first time in months, I was sleeping soundly. Thursday morning brought Vivian's world crashing down in spectacular fashion. The state insurance commissioner suspended Marcus's license indefinitely after discovering systematic fraud across multiple HOA policies. 17 communities faced canceled coverage, angry board members demanding refunds, and personal liability for accidents on properties they thought were protected. Marcus's 15-year insurance empire collapsed overnight like a controlled demolition. But instead of cutting losses and running, Vivian doubled down on desperation. Her Thursday evening phone call carried the metallic edge of someone with nothing left to lose. "You think you've won, Cole? This isn't over. I know your type. Broken veterans who can't handle pressure. One psychiatric hold is all it takes to have you declared incompetent." The threat was recorded on Rebecca's equipment, evidence of attempted psychological warfare to steal property through false mental health claims. Vivian's next move revealed how far she'd fallen from suburban sophistication to street-level thuggery. She hired what she called community security consultants, 3 ex-cops with questionable records and concealed carry permits. Their job description was elegant in its viciousness. Make my life unbearable through legal harassment until I suffered a public breakdown. The mini twist came when I recognized one of her hired muscle from my neighborhood gym. Danny Kovac, former sheriff's deputy fired for excessive force, now working private security for whoever paid cash. "Nothing personal, Brennan," he said during our accidental encounter at the hardware store. "Ladies paying good money to document your erratic behavior until you do something stupid." But Danny's conscience was stronger than his paycheck. Years of watching corrupt cops destroy good people had left him disgusted with dirty work. He agreed to record Vivian's briefings in exchange for federal immunity from whatever charges were coming. The recordings revealed her psychological warfare playbook: constant surveillance disguised as security patrols, provocation disguised as wellness checks, and documentation of my responses to justify involuntary commitment. "Push him until he snaps," Vivian instructed her team during Wednesday's briefing. Veterans with PTSD are volatile. All we need is one public incident to have him declared mentally incompetent. Classic gaslighting designed to steal my property through manufactured mental health crisis. But federal surveillance was capturing everything. Agent Santos showed me photographs of Vivian's increasingly desperate meetings with resort executives, financial records showing her personal guarantees for development costs, timeline pressure that would bankrupt her if the deal collapsed. She's personally liable for $400,000 in finder's fees, Santos explained, plus another $200,000 in consultant costs to Pinnacle's legal team. Your property is literally her only way to avoid personal bankruptcy. The stakes were higher than I'd realized. Vivian wasn't just protecting her reputation, she was fighting for financial survival. Rebecca's legal timeline was accelerating toward federal charges. Grand jury indictments prepared for insurance fraud, real estate fraud, and conspiracy. But the process required patience while Vivian's harassment campaign intensified daily. Her security team started wellness patrols past my cabin every hour, shining spotlights through windows at midnight, recording my suspicious activities, like checking mail or walking Admiral, creating psychological pressure designed to trigger public confrontation, sleep deprivation from constant surveillance, hypervigilance from knowing armed men were documenting my every move. The taste of adrenaline became my unwelcome companion during what should have been peaceful moments. Admiral's behavior reflected the escalating tension. Instead of his usual friendly greetings to neighbors, he'd positioned himself defensively by every window, ears constantly alert for approaching vehicles. Smart Dog knew danger was circling like wolves around wounded prey. But Vivian's desperation led to her biggest tactical error, scheduling Friday's emergency HOA meeting to announce my voluntary departure from Pine Ridge. Mrs. Rodriguez's intelligence network had infiltrated the meeting preparation. "She's telling people you've agreed to sell for health reasons," Rodriguez whispered during our secret coordination call. "Claims the environmental crisis is resolved and everyone's property values are protected." Vivian was selling lies to buy time while planning my psychological destruction. That's when Catherine's evidence became our nuclear weapon. The shoebox of forged documents, fake environmental reports, and financial fraud records would expose 3 years of criminal activity to the entire community simultaneously. But the federal agents warned about cornered criminals. Desperate people make desperate choices, Santos cautioned. She knows the investigation is closing in. Tomorrow's meeting could trigger unpredictable violence. As evening settled over water I legally owned, the scent of approaching storm mixed with anticipation. Every neighbor would learn their community was built on fraud. Every family would discover their trust had been systematically betrayed. The taste of justice was sharp as autumn air, but tempered by uncertainty about how Vivian would react when her lies were exposed publicly. Admiral's contented sigh by the fireplace suggested everything would work out fine, but even bloodhounds can't predict human desperation. Tomorrow would bring either community healing or community destruction. Friday morning brought the perfect storm Vivian had been brewing for months. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at Pine Ridge Community Center. Vivian had spent the week building anticipation, promising final resolution to the environmental crisis and protection of everyone's property values. What the neighbors didn't know, she planned to announce my voluntary commitment for psychiatric treatment and immediate property sale to qualified developers who could properly manage environmental concerns. Pure psychological warfare disguised as community protection. But Rebecca's federal court filing that morning changed everything. The quiet title action became public record at 9 a.m., legally establishing my ownership of Clearwater Lake. Every property owner in Pine Ridge received certified letters explaining their lake access was fraudulent and subject to immediate termination. The community meltdown was instantaneous. Mrs. Rodriguez called in tears. "Cole, people are panicking. Property values just crashed. Some families are talking about immediate sale before word spreads." Exactly what I'd feared. Innocent neighbors suffering for Vivian's crimes. But the mini twist came when Vivian's security team abandoned her. Danny Kovac called to warn me. "She's lost it completely, screaming about federal conspiracies, threatening to burn everything down rather than lose. We're out. This isn't security work anymore." Even paid muscle has limits when employers become unhinged. Agent Santos confirmed the surveillance reports. Vivian's been awake for 48 hours straight, making increasingly irrational phone calls. She attempted to withdraw her life savings in cash, but the bank froze her accounts pending federal investigation. Financial desperation plus sleep deprivation equals dangerous unpredictability. The federal timeline accelerated when Pinnacle Resorts filed emergency lawsuit, demanding immediate property transfer or $400,000 in damages. Their lawyers had discovered the federal investigation and were cutting ties to avoid criminal liability. Vivian's resort partnership imploded, leaving her personally liable for development costs she couldn't pay. But here's where community character revealed itself. Instead of panicking about property values, neighbors started asking different questions. Mrs. Rodriguez organized impromptu meetings where families shared stories about Vivian's harassment, illegal fee increases, and intimidation tactics. "She threatened to double our HOA fees if we didn't sign statements against you," confessed Maria Santos from Maple Street. "We were scared of losing our home." 3 years of suppressed anger finally found its voice. Catherine's evidence box became the smoking gun that united everyone. Her documented proof of forged environmental reports, stolen maintenance funds, and fake witness statements showed the scope of Vivian's fraud. $23,000 stolen from community funds, 15 families coerced into false statements, 6 environmental emergencies that were pure theater designed to justify illegal actions. The taste of justice was overwhelming neighbors' fear of financial loss. Rebecca's legal strategy protected everyone simultaneously. My lake ownership announcement included immediate offer of legitimate lease agreements at reduced rates. Instead of losing lake access, families would pay $200 annually instead of Vivian's $850 extortion, and get legally protected rights for the first time. Community healing instead of community destruction. But Vivian's desperation reached breaking point when federal agents arrived at her house with search warrants. She barricaded herself inside, screaming threats about destroying evidence and taking everyone down with her. The scent of smoke drifting from her chimney suggested she was burning documents that could incriminate her further. Agent Santos positioned tactical teams around Vivian's property, while Rebecca prepared emergency court orders to prevent evidence destruction. The federal investigation was moving faster than anyone expected. Admiral's behavior reflected the escalating tension. Instead of his usual evening patrol of the property, he stayed glued to my side, sensing that danger was approaching its climax. Smart Dog knew the final confrontation was imminent. Friday afternoon brought the community's democratic revolution. Mrs. Rodriguez organized emergency HOA vote to remove Vivian from presidency before evening's planned meeting. 27 households voted immediately for new leadership, effectively stripping Vivian of authority over community decisions. But Vivian refused to accept removal from office. Her response: "I'm the only thing standing between this community and financial disaster. Without me, everyone loses everything." Classic authoritarian playbook. Create crisis, then claim to be the only solution. As evening approached, the community center filled with neighbors who'd never attended HOA meetings before. Federal agents positioned themselves discreetly around the building. Rebecca sat in the back, with court orders ready for immediate filing. The smell of autumn rain mixed with anticipation as families gathered to confront 3 years of systematic fraud. Children played in the hallway, while parents prepared to reclaim their community from criminal leadership. Vivian arrived alone, carrying a briefcase and wearing the desperate smile of someone with nothing left to lose. Her security team was gone, her husband was hospitalized, her financial empire was destroyed. But she still had one final card to play. Admiral's low growl as she entered the building warned me that the most dangerous moment was about to begin. The community center had never seen anything like this crowd. 73 residents packed a room designed for 30. Children sat on parents' laps, while elderly neighbors leaned on walkers. Federal agents blended into the back walls like ghosts watching a seance. Local newspaper reporter Linda Ellis positioned herself near the front, camera ready for whatever explosion was coming. Vivian called the meeting to order, with shaking hands and bloodshot eyes. "Neighbors, I've gathered you tonight to announce resolution of our environmental crisis," she began, voice cracking under pressure. "After extensive negotiations, Mr. Brennan has agreed to voluntary psychiatric treatment and immediate property sale to qualified developers who can properly manage lake contamination." The lie hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. That's when I stood up from the back row. Actually, Vivian, let's tell them the truth. Her face went white as November frost. She hadn't expected me to attend my own character assassination. Rebecca stepped forward with a stack of court documents thick enough to choke a judge. Ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon federal court confirmed that Cole Brennan owns the entire Clearwater Lake, including all water rights and access control. The room erupted like a disturbed hornet's nest. Gasps, whispers, confused questions overlapping until Mrs. Rodriguez banged a coffee mug for silence. Vivian's desperate response: "He's lying. The federal court has no jurisdiction over local HOA matters." That's when Catherine Valdez, sweet 78-year-old former conspirator, rose from her front row seat carrying the shoebox that would destroy everything. "I have proof," Catherine announced, her voice stronger than anyone expected. 3 years of forged documents, fake environmental reports, and stolen community funds. Vivian made me help her, and I kept copies of everything. The evidence spilled across the community center floor like truth finally escaping from prison. Bank records showing $23,000 in stolen maintenance funds. Environmental reports signed by consultants with marketing degrees. Witness statements Catherine had forged under Vivian's threats. Vivian's empire crumbling in real time. "You don't understand," Vivian screamed, abandoning all pretense of composure. "Without the resort development, this entire community becomes worthless. I was protecting your property values." Jake stepped forward with his financial analysis. Actually, Vivian's fraud was destroying property values. Every home sale here violated state disclosure laws because buyers were promised lake access nobody had legal right to sell. The mathematical reality hit like ice water. 31 families had bought homes based on fraudulent lake rights. Their mortgages, insurance policies, and property taxes were all based on access that never legally existed. But here came my mic drop moment. "Here's what's really happening," I announced, voice carrying across the stunned silence. "Yes, I own the lake. Yes, your current access is illegal, but I'm offering every family legitimate lease agreements at $200 annually, less than a quarter of what Vivian's been stealing from you." The relief was audible. Instead of losing everything, families would save money and get legally protected lake rights for the first time. Vivian's final desperate play. She pulled a .38 revolver from her briefcase and pointed it directly at my chest. "Nobody leaves this room until everyone agrees to my terms," she snarled, finger on the trigger. 3 years of work isn't dying because one veteran read property deeds. Federal agents moved like lightning. Agent Santos tackled Vivian from behind, while Agent Davis secured the weapon. Handcuffs clicked with the satisfying sound of justice finally arriving. "Vivian Moorcock, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder, and violation of federal RICO statutes," Santos announced, while reading Miranda rights to a woman who'd finally run out of lies. The newspaper photographer captured the moment perfectly, Vivian in handcuffs, while neighbors applauded behind her. That photo would run on front pages across 3 states as symbol of community fighting back against corruption. Mrs. Rodriguez grabbed the makeshift microphone. "All in favor of accepting Cole's lake lease proposal and electing him as community steward, say aye." The aye votes sounded like thunder rolling across water. Linda Ellis approached with her reporter's notebook. "Mr. Brennan, any comment on tonight's events?" I looked around the room at neighbors who'd found their voices again. Children who'd witnessed justice prevailing, elderly residents who could keep their homes without fear. My grandfather bought this land to build community, not destroy it. Tonight, we honored his vision. The taste of victory was sweet as morning coffee after the longest night of your life. As federal agents led Vivian away in handcuffs, Admiral's tail wagged for the first time in weeks. Smart Dog knew the danger had passed, and the good guys had won. Justice had finally come to Pine Ridge. The smoke had finally cleared, and Pine Ridge looked nothing like the battlefield it once was. The legal resolution came swift and decisive. Vivian received 18 years federal prison for RICO conspiracy, real estate fraud, and attempted murder. Marcus got 12 years for insurance fraud across multiple states. 3 Pinnacle Resort executives faced similar sentences for their role in the land speculation scheme. Justice served with interest compounded. But the real victory was community healing. Mrs. Rodriguez was elected HOA president with a mandate for transparency and neighbor-first policies. Monthly fees dropped from Vivian's $850 extortion to $180 for actual maintenance costs. Every financial decision required public vote. Every vendor contract got competitive bidding. Democracy worked when honest people were in charge. The Clearwater Conservation Trust, funded by legitimate lake access fees, became a model for sustainable community lake management. Water quality improved 200% with proper environmental oversight. Native fish populations rebounded. Invasive species disappeared through volunteer removal programs. My lake was healthier than it had been in decades. The social transformation exceeded every expectation. Annual Liberation Day Festival celebrated community victory over corruption, with barbecue, live music, and children's fishing contest. Admiral became official festival mascot, wearing a red bandana and accepting belly rubs from kids who weren't born when this fight began. Catherine Valdez redeemed herself through community service, organizing neighborhood watch programs that actually protected residents instead of harassing them. Her guilt had transformed into fierce dedication to preventing future corruption. Forgiveness heals communities better than revenge. The ripple effects spread beyond Pine Ridge. Rebecca's federal case led to investigations of HOA fraud in 12 states. Congress passed the Clearwater Act, requiring disclosure of actual water rights in lakefront property sales. My story became case study in law schools teaching real estate fraud prevention. One veteran's fight had changed national policy. Personal healing came gradually, like sunrise over calm water. Sarah Ellis, the water rights attorney, became more than professional colleague. We'd bonded over legal strategy and stayed connected through personal conversation. Admiral approved of her immediately, which settled the matter in my mind. Love grows in unexpected places when you're not looking for it. The economic impact surprised everyone. Legitimate lake management attracted eco-tourists, fishing enthusiasts, and conservation groups. Local businesses thrived serving visitors who came for clean water and honest community values. Property values stabilized at sustainable levels based on actual amenities, not fraudulent promises. Truth created prosperity better than lies ever could. But the deepest satisfaction came from honoring Ezra's legacy. Reading his letters at community events, sharing his vision of lakes bringing neighbors together during difficult times. His 1943 dream of healing waters and honest people had finally been realized 80 years later. Some legacies take generations to fulfill. The practical lessons resonated far beyond Pine Ridge. Always verify water rights before buying lakefront property. Document harassment patterns. Individual incidents seem minor, but patterns reveal criminal intent. Know your HOA bylaws better than corrupt leaders do. Build quiet alliances with neighbors who want fairness but fear retaliation. Knowledge prevents victimization. Sitting on Ezra's dock this morning, watching mist rise off water that reflected autumn colors like liquid art, Admiral stretched contentedly beside me. The old bloodhound had lived through community war and community peace, preferring peace, but ready for whatever came next. Smart dogs understand what humans often forget. Home is worth fighting for. The taste of coffee mixed with satisfaction as neighbors waved from their morning routines. Children caught bluegill from the fishing pier we'd built with conservation funds. Elderly residents enjoyed sunset walks on trails maintained by volunteer labor. This was community, as it should be. My phone buzzed with message from Sheriff's Department. Similar HOA corruption reported in neighboring county. Would I be willing to share experience with affected residents? Admiral's ears perked up at my chuckle. What do you think, old boy? Ready for another adventure? His single bark sounded exactly like, bring it on. The lake that healed one broken veteran was ready to heal other communities. Ezra's vision continued spreading like ripples from stones thrown into still water. Some stories never really end. They just inspire new chapters. Drop a comment sharing your HOA nightmare. You might not be as powerless as you think. Hit subscribe for more stories about regular people taking down corrupt systems and winning against impossible odds.